Hello and welcome to this edition of Talking Subs. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the single-use plastics problem and how we talk about it and why it is important about how it is framed. And to go through this fascinating topic, we have Dr. Jade Berman, who is the Operations Manager for Northern Ireland Environment Link. Jade, you're very welcome to Talking Subs.
Thank you very much, David. Happy to be here.
Jade, first question on this. Why is how we talk about this, why is how we frame issues like single-use plastics so important in the environmental debate?
So plastics is one of those issues, especially single-use plastics, that people connect to. They can see it, they can feel it, they can feel they can do something about it. It's a bit of a low-hanging fruit, but it's not having enough done about it at the moment. So by connecting to people about plastics, it's a bit of a gateway. You can connect to them about plastics, and then you can bring other environmental issues in too, and you can cause those behavioural change shifts, which can lead to more action and more change.
And is in terms of how we're actually talking about this and other environmental issues, I mean, obviously people can, take a look at things like single-use plastics and think, oh, well, it's just there. It's just something that I've always used. So in terms of the behavioral change aspect of what you've talked about, how is how we talk about it important to get that behavior change?
I think we need to talk about it in everyday situations and situations that people can relate to. So in terms of people recognize that often when they're out and about, they're more likely to, for example, pick up a sachet of sauce. They're going to, go and get their little container and have their coffee on their way to work, for example. And it's thinking about these things and things that people can do so they feel that they're also taking action directly, as well as going that step further and thinking how they can influence others to take those change. Because what we actually need is sort of system change and shifting. And we need to talk to people about how they can be part of that system change and how they can influence that circular economy change as well. So in terms of framing, we really want things to be, talk about real things that people can relate to. So we talk about the actual cotton buds, we talk about the actual cups. It's not that they're the only things, but they're things people can see, feel, touch, and relate to and think are real. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that this was something you were talking about during the recent debate about the Climate Act or the Climate Change Act that was recently passed by the Northern Ireland Assembly. Obviously, how we talk about environmental issues, quite often, something that we hear about is that people feel a wee bit overwhelmed. They often feel like, oh my goodness, the problem is so big, and how do we do something about it? So what's been your experience, just because you've got vast environmental experience in the sector, and obviously with Northern Ireland Environment Link, you work with a variety of different stakeholders trying to make trying to move these issues forward. So what is it you're seeing in that piece of work?
Yeah, so it is true that people can get very overwhelmed and they want to feel that they're making a difference. So I think there's two elements. There's the physical difference people want to make, so that's where they do their personal act, but they can also act at work. People have far more of a sphere of influence than they realize. They have what they do at their home with their families and their friends. They have what they do at work in terms of influencing their work practices, but they also have what they influence their outer sphere as well. So you'd be surprised that, if sending a letter to an MLA or sending one to your local councillor, they actually normally will respond. And you may think, oh, I'm just one person, what difference can I make? But it's that, you can call it the butterfly effect, but I like to call it like the thundering of elephants effect, I guess, is that if you actually start making a noise, those vibrations travel further and you can influence others to also make a difference as well, whether that's a single-use plastics or that's another environmental issue that you're concerned about in your area or beyond as well.
Yeah, so something that's obviously important is about getting people to take action and recognizing the power that they have, Jade. Again, just because you work across this sector, and I know you've got a big interest in the policy debates about this. What advice would you give to people if someone says, okay, well, look, yeah, I want to take action, but I don't particularly know how? Say, I want action on things like a deposit return scheme. I want to see my councils taking more action around developing a circular economy. What advice would you give to people on that?
So if I was, anybody can do this. This is not something that you have to have a policy and deep knowledge on. You just have to show you care and it's important to you. So there are things, there's a website called findmylocalmp.com. You can kind of look at that, or your MLA, because we're in Northern Ireland as well. Get their email address and send an email. So, you can also send a letter if you prefer to send a letter. You can write. So you can actually raise these topics. If you want to influence further, you can start your own petition. You can also ask other people. Think about who you work with. So you've got your friends. You might have kids. They might have school friends. You can get schools to respond. There's nothing that politicians like responding to more than as if a load of school kids write to them saying they really care about something, because they're the voters of the future and they want to show to their parents that they're listening to the kids. And it's all about hearing the kids right now. So they want those great photo opportunities, but it's not just about that. It's about shifting it beyond the contact to actual action happening as well. So a major part is doing that. And I always say about voting, you think one vote doesn't count, but actually voting and contacting them and saying what issues you care about does make a big difference to influencing that policy shift. Because we want to do the sort of the bottom-up groundswell approach, but we also need that system change, and we need it now. So to do that, we need to push that your levers of influence is what we call it. You've got lots of them, be it your local councillor, be it the head of a local business who's showing they're leading the way, because let's be honest, a lot of businesses are now moving towards green selling things too. So you want to make sure that's happening in the right way for the right reason too.
Yeah, and obviously, Jade, because if anyone's watching this, they may recognize your face from many interviews that I know you did around issues like the Climate Change Act. Just in terms of how we frame these acts, I mean, in terms of civic society. So, I mean, how the media talks about them, how policymakers talk about these issues too. As we record at the moment, we're talking about heat waves. Okay, we're seeing them on the continent, but we're also seeing them locally here as well. People talk about things like single-use plastics, and they go, "Well, sure. What can we do in terms of how we frame the issues?" How important is that for policymakers and for the media as well, that they're actually framing these in the right way, and that we're not just looking at these in terms of, oh, great, there's nice warm weather outside, or oh, great, sure, we're producing X amount extra plastic, and sure, we don't need to worry about that. Why are things like that important?
Yeah, so framing is vital. And we recently did research on what the public perceptions are of who they should be getting the messages from and how they should come. And unfortunately, media came bottom. Only 3% really trusted the media in relation to climate change, which is not really a great number. Government and local government came a little higher at 4%, but really they want to hear things from scientists. They want to hear it from people in sort of who have positions of knowledge, like for climate change, it's the Met Office and things like that as well. So people want to hear from people they know. The other thing is people switch off. If we're all doom and gloom the entire time, it causes anxiety and it causes people to switch off. And we really need to think about the solutions as well. I know what's coming down the road. I know it's not great, to put it mildly, but it is about thinking, okay, but what can we do right here and now? What can we do to actually shift that dial and move towards making a change? And the language we use, there's a lot of language, if you take climate change, there's a lot of language, we're going to fight it, we're going to stop it. And actually, it's not a person, it's not something you can fight, it's almost nebulous. It's actually something where we need to think, what are the practical actions and solutions that we can take forward? What are the things people can do so they actually will read your article and read to the end and realize things they can do? So with the heat wave, yes, it's kind of like, oh, look, it's sunny outside. But then, things that people relate to are things from the survey was like they aren't sleeping as well. They're realizing that perhaps, if you relate it back to waste, their waste might be stinking a bit because it isn't being collected. So, washing and recycling there is a thing. But you might be also, there are parts of England at the moment where there are villages that have run out of water. So, there's lots of connections there. And I guess it all relates back to thinking, okay, in the bigger picture, if we use less, that actually uses less energy, it uses less resources, it costs less for a person as well, which is very important in the current economic climate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about not just thinking about things in a one issue tangent and going, okay, what is the goal? What do people want? What's most important to people at the moment? And what are the kind of co-benefits along the way? So, for example, if I take something like cycling, you could say, okay, so I'm not using the car, so I'm cutting the fuel, and that might be the motivation for me. But for somebody else, it might be, I've got a good picture on Instagram of me posing on my bike, or I'm feeling fitter, or both physically and mentally, or it's saving me money. So it's kind of trying to get that more holistic view into the framing, and worrying a little bit less about the actual, it's almost like what's the outcome going to be of the messaging. So framing it in that way, so thinking about the audience and framing those messages in the right way, because basically saying, oh, the young people are going to save us is not going to work, because we need to do stuff now, and we need the people who are in power to do stuff now and shift things now. And if I take it back to single-use plastics, I know there's lots of barriers in the way of various sort of internal market acts and things, but Scotland have basically said, okay, we're just going to plow ahead and we're going to do it anyway. And so they've just put their bill in to reduce things and so that it's illegal. So that means all businesses then are on the same keel as well.
Mm-hmm.
So they're all having the same costs. But I mean, I used to live in Germany. And over there, it's a shift in what the culture is. Like over there, it was normal to take we didn't have fangled, special cups that come up and down, and, special like thermal mugs that we can carry with the branding on from our company because they've given us a mug or they've given us a bottle. We used to have a mug. Like, do you remember? I don't even have a mug here. I've only got my glass, but we had mugs, and you could either like leave your mug in the shop so that, it was kind of reused, or you took it in and swapped it. And they had something called Fant, which was basically you dropped it off, got washed and reused. And I know there's all the sort of things about, is the water amount and the energy amount to do that. But at the end of the day, it's about stop thinking of us as a disposable economy and start thinking of things with value, and really valuing what we've got. And that sort of shift from single use is not just about plastic, it's single use anything really. You want to think it's no use going, okay, well, I've now got my special newfangled bamboo hemp mug, but if it's just going to get thrown away or only used once anyway, that's still waste. So
yeah, and we've had previous contributors on this series, Jade, who've rightly pointed out, the fact that in a cost of living crisis, we're paying for this through your taxes, through your rates. Because you're right, if it's something that can, when you put it in the bin, that's not the end of your relationship with it, because your council or the executive or the national government has to deal with the waste that comes from it, and that all costs money, and that comes out of your tax, your paycheck at the end of the month, whenever you're going to pay those things. So just interesting on the research you were quoting there about who people are listening to. People want to hear from experts. People want to hear from scientists. The media less so, from what you were from what you. That's okay. And politicians a little not much better on that. So in terms of platforming, the people that we platform, how important is it about framing these conversations? And for policymakers, how important is it that they are listening, that basically if they're convening committee hearings on bills, if they are convening town hall meetings on issues, or they're inviting people to party conferences, how important is it that those experts, the climate scientists, and people with those messages are at those type of events?
I think it's vital. I think it's absolutely vital. And I think it's also bringing people in who people trust. So there is that whole trusted friend thing. So like, for example, if you're talking to the farming sector, you want a farmer to come and talk to them about what they're doing. You don't want, somebody preaching at them. You want someone who they want to listen to. The first step is getting ears open to hear coming through the door. So in terms of the media, there's a whole shift that needs to happen in terms of the messaging. If you take climate change there with the look lovely people on the beach, and I do think this time round with the heat wave and the proposed drought that's going to happen across, I think there will start to be a bit of a shift, because they're realizing that the country is brown over there as opposed to green, and there needs to be a shift. But it is waking up to that sort of that messaging about, okay, it's not just frightening people, but giving people things they can do. And in terms of how the messages should get out, I've been trying to think about this a little bit, because with the media being 3% of trustworthy, I'm like, okay, what do people do? Because they do look a lot on social media. They do still read the media, even if it's just to scorn at it and not trust it. But we need to think, how can you shift so the media is more trustworthy in terms of messages coming across? How can we get those experts directly to people? Is it through producing materials for workplaces and producing materials directly endorsed by these experts as such, so it's more trustworthy? Is it through making sure they're the ones talking to the politicians, and then in preparation for when they're doing policy, rather than the government preparing those responses, as they've done in some cases, they get experts preparing those reports to provide that evidence. So it is about that kind of shift from thinking, okay, the government are just going to come up with policy and that's going to happen, to actually that sort of preparation. And I know that's happened a little bit more. I know with the deposit scheme that went out, that was Eunomia through RAP that prepared a report for that. It's just that we need to move pace on all of these things a lot. So
yeah, and you've been talking about, just because this is important. I want to spend the last few minutes that we have with you, Jade, talking about this, because it's a theme that you've gone back to, is about how we message this, about that there is hope. This isn't like fighting World War II or World War One. There isn't, it's about a collective action that we can all do individually through making just 2-3 different decisions every day, small decisions every day, and that all adds up. I mean, in terms of getting that message out there, and because again, we're in this series, we're focusing on single-use plastics, obviously, but you referenced the thing there about cups in Germany, about bringing your mug and leaving it there, and then you kind of pay it forward. How do we, in your opinion, get that type of thinking out there in the populace in Northern Ireland?
It's a good question. There's kind of push and pull factors. So push factors are those top down, you change that policy at the top so that businesses are on the level playing field. They have to do these things. And then the pull factors are the incentives, and the incentives don't always have to be monetary. Sometimes it's kind of like a collective social warm feeling that you're doing the right thing, that causes shifts as well. So it's looking at those sort of both ends of things, and you need both. So if I'm thinking, if we get back to single-use plastics as opposed to climate, there's it's not about doing everything perfectly. I don't want you to go out in your house and get rid of every bit of plastic in your house. I want you to, first of all, not buy new stuff, and that's whether it's the latest fangled eco thing or if it is a new plastic thing. So buy less. Next of all, use what you've got as it is for what it is. I won't tell you how many things I've got back from childcare that's sort of like new bits of plastic stuck together so you can't recycle it into some kind of creature. So use what you've got for its purpose. If you can't use what you've got for its purpose, use it for something else. And think about that you're not like, it is being used for something useful. And and then think about the alternatives as well, and are they really good? Because we've got lots of greenwashing is the latest thing going on. So like my husband has just bought a new shaving brush and it says it's vegan friendly and cruelty free all over it, and I'm like, did you read what it was made of? And it's like, yeah, it's plastic because it's vegan friendly. And I'm not saying, I don't want to cause another thing there, but just because it says it's vegan does not mean that it's environmentally friendly in the long run. So it's being a little bit more savvy, but also don't like hold yourself up if you make any mistakes. It's better to do lots of things imperfectly than do one thing and do everything perfectly and be scared of it all. So what you do does make a difference, and all of it does. So just do the things you can and then do a few more, and talk to your politicians.
Yeah, and also, and Jade, this will be my final question to you. In terms of that, we actually do have a lot of power, as consumers, as voters, as citizens. We do have an awful lot of power in this, and we'll ultimately producers will follow their customers, politicians will follow the public because they want us to keep buying products in ways that we want, but also politicians and policymakers want to get reelected, so they will follow the public on this as well. I mean, that I think is critical as well in the society we live in.
Yeah, no, that's true. I think there's still this push for growing the economy, and I'm not going to get into too much about donut economics right now, but basically I think we need to think not just about growth in terms of stuff and consumption, but thinking about switching more to a service economy as well. Fix what we have. It needs to become like cool to have something where it's got patch on it, that's sort of like some brightly colored fix that keeps things going and you can wear it longer. It needs to become the thing to do to wear the same thing for 100 days. Don't wear it for 100 days, but wearing something for longer as such. It's I'm talking about clothes here, but generally, we have like a lot of built-in obsolescence, and there is a shift slowly in the halls that be, both at European level, and that will cascade down as well. But we need to think, okay, what can I do personally? And it's not just that you've saved that object, it's the influence you have on others to do similar. So that is what I mean about the sphere of influence that's so important. There's a lot of people, believe it or not, that do listen to what you say and think, and are influenced in ways that you may not even realize in terms of your actions. So
yeah, absolutely right. And Jade, that is such a nice proactive positive message to end off on, and that's what this series is all about. You've been watching Dr. Jade Berman. Thank you so much for joining us, Jade.
Thank you, David.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Talking Subs. Please remember to hit the subscribe button so that you can keep up to date with all future episodes from this series. Thank you for watching.